Hi, everybody. Welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. I'm Carrie. Hi, Kelly. Nice to see you again. How are you?
It is lovely to see you. I'm excited about today's show.
Yeah. So we're your hosts for today's episode, and today we are naming names. Just a little context before we get started with our fabulous roster of guests. One of the many ways that we work to get at the root causes of animal cruelty here at the Humane Society is by engaging some of the biggest players out there, the corporations whose practices can sometimes impact literally millions of animals. And some of those companies over the years have shown a lot of willingness to engage and work on their standards, things from what they sell to how they treat animals directly to how they source animal-based materials and lots more. And so, some of these corporations are willing to hear from animal advocates and learn how they can do better. And some of them not so much. And so we've got some leaders from three of our big campaigns to talk about which companies out there are maybe in the not category, to put it mildly, and really should be doing a lot better to be more helpful and move their standards for animals. So I'm going to go ahead and without further ado introduce our fabulous guests. Today we have Carla Dumas, Vice President of the Farm Animal Production, John Goodwin, Senior Director of the Puppy Mills Campaign, and PJ Smith, Director of Fashion Policy at the Humane Society of the United States. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right, everybody. So as Carrie said, we're naming names. Gloves are off. We're ready to rumble. So Carla, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about Farm Animal Protection, what you and your team do.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, Carrie. Excited to be on here. So from a global sense, our global focus on farm animal work is centered around reducing the number of animals who are killed for meat, egg, and dairy products, and also end the cruelest production practices. So when I say production practices, our work is designed to put an end to extreme confinement. So what that means, it includes hens confined to cages for egg production, mother pigs confined to gestation crates, and chickens raised for meat that are bred to grow so quickly, they're confined to bodies that are often unable to withstand this rapid growth. Now, as it relates to what we're talking about today, part of this work to eliminate these practices is done by engaging and negotiating, Carrie, like you mentioned, working with the largest, oftentimes global corporations to enact and follow through on purchasing policies for their eggs and pork, buying cage and crate-free sources, and purchasing chicken from producers that are transitioning to slower growing breeds, enrichments within their industrial barns like lighting, bedding, as well as more humane slaughter practices.
Great. Thanks, Carla. So to lay some more groundwork, I'm going to kick it over to you, Mr. John Goodwin. Tell us about what you and your team does.
You know, at the Humane Society of the United States, we are the only one of the large organizations that has a full team dedicated to stopping puppy mills, which is kind of amazing if you think about it, because it is such a major issue. And right now, our focus is on stopping the sale of puppies in pet stores, because most puppies in pet stores come from puppy mills. And while the mills themselves are largely concentrated in these Midwestern states with large agricultural economies where big ag does everything they can to stop us from getting even an extra square inch of space for a mother dog in a cage, well, they've got to sell those puppies somewhere. And so that's where we have the lower hanging fruit, where we can really tackle this industry by shutting off the problem on the market side. And we do that with a mix of legislation, undercover investigations, being an information clearinghouse, educating the public, helping people find humane sources of dogs for their next four-legged family member. It's a really robust, multi-pronged approach that's having some real results.
Thanks, John. So from farm animals to puppies to PJ, what do you have for us? What are you and your team up to, and how are you saving animals?
Hey, everybody. Pleasure to be here. The fur team, we are looking to end the fur trade as we know it. And HSUS has a really, as JP mentioned, like a multi-pronged attack, but we really hope to close the markets for these fur products. There's just like no humane way to raise a wild animal in a cage on a fur factory farm. And so we were working with some of the biggest companies around the world, the biggest fashion companies, to go fur free. We're also working in cities and states to ban fur sales for new fur products. And so that's California, which was the largest fur seller in the United States. They sold upwards towards a quarter of the fur sold in the United States, banned fur sales starting the beginning of this year. And so that's no matter if the company sells fur or not, they can't sell fur in California. So we're closing those markets. And what's really cool about that is the profit margin for these fur farms is so razor thin that if you can lower the demand for fur products just a little bit, those fur farmers aren't making any money, and so they have to close as well. And so we're seeing a rapid decline of the fur trade around the world because of this approach.
Before we circle back to Carla, I think we should have acknowledged with PJ that we have here the recent Neiman Marcus. What we can't call you a centerfold, right, for their Christmas catalog, but right up there.
It's my dog Franny and I got to go to do a real photo shoot in New York City with Neiman Marcus, and we're in the holiday catalog this year, which is really celebrating our work and in the Humane Society. It's really cool. I don't generally like to be in the front like that, but Franny looked good. I was glad to be by her side.
But you'll take one for the team. We appreciate you and thank you for your service.
Yeah, and that's because of all the great work you've done on these issues, right, PJ? I mean, like it's something that Neiman Marcus did because we've had a long-standing work with them, correct?
Yeah, these relationships, I mean, JP and Carla can vouch for that. These relationships take time. You got to build them over the years. There's a trust there. And once you get to that point where they understand that, their customers care about animals and you can show them that, they generally want to do that good thing because they know they can do well by doing good. And we're seeing that across the board.
Yeah. So how long have you been engaging with Neiman Marcus at this point?
I've been at the Humane Society of the United States for 14 years, and I've been engaging with Neiman Marcus for 14 years. And I can tell you it always hasn't been a wonderful conversation, but we got there through the years. And again, it's about building that relationship. And
absolutely.
And you got to play the long game sometimes.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. And as we often hear, for all of our listeners or consumers, we're all consumers, we vote with our dollars. So I think it's an interesting point too, that when companies do what the market demands and what consumers want, it can be a win-win for everyone. So all right, we've talked about some good. Shout out to Neiman Marcus. Carla, what are some companies that you and your team have worked with that maybe or companies you've identified in your experience, they could be doing a lot more for animals? Let's name them. Let's get them out there.
Yeah, happy to. Starting things off to kind of piggyback off of what PJ was saying. So going into the work that we do and all of us do here on the podcast today, our goal is to work with these corporations to enact this change and ensure that they follow through with these commitments. So obviously we're motivated to make this happen because it's the right thing to do for animals. And what PJ said as well, corporations are recognizing more and more that this is what consumers want. So I will say that, we have been for nearly 20 years working with many corporations that are doing better for farm animals and making progress. So I do want to highlight, of course, that there are many corporations doing that. But what I would say as well, and what we're here to talk about, is there are corporations or producers that appear to be committed to keeping cruelty as a standard practice when it comes to what we're doing. So I would say from the work with our farm animal protection team, the worst offenders would be Wal-Mart, Kroger, and Tyson. So I would say, and if you want me to go into more details with this, I would lump Walmart and Kroger together in considering the worst when it comes to their cage-free egg policies. And, for context and going a bit deeper into that, when we ask corporations to purchase cage-free eggs, we're asking them to eliminate the most abusive practice for hens in the industry. The animals spend the majority of their lives confined to a space barely larger than their own bodies. So when we say cage-free, that means the wire cages are removed, allowing them to engage in more natural practices like foraging, perching, nesting, walking, and of course, spreading their wings there. So I want to be clear that when we are asking this in the process here, oftentimes the hens are still never given access to outdoors, natural light, and are in an overcrowded barn. So it's not a sanctuary by any means, but it's a vast improvement to the conventional practices. So starting off with Wal-Mart, we actually began engaging with Wal-Mart back in 2005. And in 2010 was the first change that we saw. They moved all private label eggs, meaning their Wal-Mart brand eggs, to cage-free. In 2015, we worked with them to continue many of their animal welfare commitments. Unfortunately, what we saw since 2015 is that Wal-Mart has reversed its commitments to go cage-free on eggs and crate-free on pork. And they've also gone back, shockingly, on making their private label eggs even cage-free. So that was a transition that they had, and they've since reversed that. And throughout our continued work with Wal-Mart, they pledged to do internal work to develop a plan for cage-free and just continue to no longer follow through. What I will say is that over the last 2 years, with the progress that they're reporting, they have roughly increased cage-free eggs by 1%. So meaning at this rate, Wal-Mart will reach 100% cage-free in 79 years, which their current goal is for 2025, which clearly they're not going to be able to reach at the rate they're going there. So it leaves very little confidence on our end that they're taking this seriously. Very similar with Kroger. They made a commitment to go 100% cage-free by 2025 and have since reversed that promise. One thing that I did want to note about Kroger that is a little bit different as well, there was polling data that was published earlier this year by Data for Progress. And not only is Kroger not following through with their commitments, but they are also misleading the public with the company's marketing of caged chickens versus cage-free with their egg sales. So
what are they doing there, Carla? Like what's the misleading things that they're...
So what the polling showed was that in looking at a lot of questions with a lot of if you imagine going into a grocery store and seeing the eggs as you're going in there, oftentimes labels will show happy hens or outside or different deceptive words that can be included. So it's leading consumers that are looking to make those changes and purchase more humane products into thinking that those products are higher welfare or cage-free, when in fact they're not. So there is actually a class action lawsuit that is looking at what Kroger is doing within the misleading information as well. So we certainly will continue to follow and see what happens there. But I will say, with different grocers such as Costco and Target that are switching or actively switching to cage-free, we just feel that Walmart and Kroger do not act like companies that care about the treatment of animals.
Wow.
And so you said you've been working with them, Carla, since I think in Wal-Mart 2005. You've been working with Kroger.
Correct.
And so you're continuing to work with them. So it sounds like if they, said, okay, we are going to meet that 2025 deadline, and reached out to you, you'd continue those discussions, do whatever it took to work with them to highlight that. They're much like we said, PJ's playing the long game. They are playing the long game. And as I think in your words, I thought that was interesting, keeping cruelty as a standard.
Yes.
So Carla, do you have a sense of what caused this? I mean, it sounded like Walmart was heading in a good direction and then started drifting back. Like, what is it? I mean, that sounds like a team that sort of wasn't actually prepared to play the long game. And did they have some sort of shift at the top, or was there? Do you have any sort of insights into that? Or
There's a lot of factors that can potentially play into those changes. Of course, turnover, depending on who is overseeing procurement and those changes there. Certainly looking at the industry and challenges that come up. However, there are a variety of companies that are able to and showing that this is something that can be done. So a lot of those are just excuses for not making this a priority or listening to what consumers are wanting. And I would say that oftentimes as well, thinking about profit margins and what that looks like, obviously we don't want to talk about that, but certainly in thinking about supply and demand. But what we do know, again, if companies like McDonald's, which is nearly 100% cage-free at the time, if they can do it, or for example, the largest food service companies like Aramark, Sodexo, Compass Group, if they can make these changes with the amount that they're purchasing, grocery stores like Walmart and Kroger can absolutely do that.
Yeah, it's been
it sounds like
that it can scale.
Yeah, there's certainly companies that are doing it, whether Target or Costco you mentioned earlier. So so thanks, Carla. And John, I know you've got somebody on your list, that you're just ready to share that are maybe not the best actors in this arena.
Well, of course, for the Puppy Mills team, I don't think we have to do a massive drum roll with a lot of suspense. I think
hold on. Did it, John?
It's of course Petland, the largest chain in the country that still sells puppy mill puppies, the company that's been sued by countless customers for selling sick puppies, the company that's been investigated by multiple state attorney generals, the company that's been investigated by the Centers for Disease Control for their part in a zoonotic disease outbreak that put customers and employees in the hospital. I could go on and on and on, but they are the ones who will get coal in their stocking this year.
Wow. Those are harsh fighting words.
Well, just got to call the balls and the strikes as they come in, right?
Well, I like it. Let's spill all the tea. So tell us though, John, with Petland, I mean, I believe similar to Carla and the company she's mentioned, you've tried to work with them to transition to a humane model, right?
So when I was in the animal fighting campaign, my predecessors in the Puppy Mills campaign had a big investigation they released linking Petland to various puppy mills. And this was a long time ago. This was like 2008. The work continued into 2009. And then Petland approached HSUS and said that they wanted to be part of the solution. They wanted to sit down with us and help reform the world of commercial dog breeding. And we sat at the table with them negotiating, trying to get some sort of positive results for the dogs for a long, long time. And I came to the Puppy Mills campaign in 2016 and quickly realized that this was a delay tactic. They wanted to keep us at the table, yak.
Right. Reform.
Never actually doing anything that led to any results. The USDA regulations for commercial dog breeding kennels or puppy mills say you can keep a dog in a cage only 6 inches longer than her body. In the 9 years that we talked to Petland, the dogs didn't get an extra square inch of space through the USDA regulations, 1 inch. I mean, it wasn't worth it. So then we started doing undercover investigations in Petland, expecting to continue to link them to puppy mills, but shocked at how many sick puppies we found in their back rooms, even finding dead puppies in freezers. So now we have a full campaign to convince Petland to stop selling puppies, join all the other major pet store chains that focus on pet products and pet services, embrace a humane business model. So that's what we're trying to get them to do.
And John, if I can, just real quick for listeners that maybe aren't as familiar with this issue, when you talk about Petland being, not a good actor in this space, but those pet stores that maybe have pets in the stores, but they are different than Petland, just a quick hit on kind of differentiating that for consumers.
Yeah, well, so there is a big difference between a store like Petland or any of the independent puppy selling stores that have glass display cases filled with lots of puppies, and another business whose profit comes from the sale of pet products, but they host adoption events, they work with rescues and shelters to get homeless animals out the door, et cetera, et cetera. I will say that this puppy selling business model, this is not a problem that's limited to Petland. Any of these stores that have 30 glass display cases that they want to be kept full with puppies all the time, a lot of different varieties of different breeds. They're not going through a Rolodex with 400 responsible breeders trying to find who has a litter available. No. They're going to some mass producer who can keep a reliable supply of puppies in the stores. And that's why almost all pet store puppies come from puppy mills.
Yeah, it's like treating dogs as widgets, like who's the best widget supplier.
Oh yeah, and when you look at like these little, they have these state associations for these puppy mill owners, like Missouri Pet Breeders Association, that kind of thing. And when you flip through their little newsletters, they refer to the dogs as livestock. They see them as agriculture commodities, not as family members.
So, John, and after these initial sort of dialogues with Petland, it seems like since then they've sort of gone into more of a fighting us at every turn mode around legislation and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the really exciting things that I saw emerging when I came to the Puppy Mills campaign, and I've tried to really double down on, was the passage of these local ordinances that prohibit the sale of puppies in pet stores. There are about 480 localities now that have passed ordinances like that, now 7 states. Petland is freaked out by that. So they are spending millions of dollars to try to pass their own legislation that would take away your right to petition your city council to pass an ordinance regulating pet stores. They want to take away your right to fight puppy mills through your city council, to petition your local elected officials through these bills that would preempt, they call preemption bills, that would preempt any sort of local ordinance. Petland even requires their franchisees to send in 0.5% of their revenue every week, even if they didn't make any money. They're not sending in 0.5% of their profits to corporate. They're sending 0.5% of their revenue to go to a war chest, pay for lobbyists, lawyers, message testing, just everything they need to fight us.
Yeah. Wow, I wish they could invest some of that war chest in taking care of the puppies. That'd be nice.
It would be a huge difference, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
A huge difference.
And I want to make sure, because it is the holiday season coming up, and sometimes people do want to add animals to their family. Absolutely. I think John's made it clear. Don't go to Petland. Your local shelter, I can tell you, is busting at the seams. And there's lots of great animals at your county shelter or your private nonprofit shelter.
It's a crisis time for shelters. In fact, It's not like a few years ago when they seem to be emptying out. So hopefully everyone can find a little room in their house for maybe one more dog, one more cat.
Yeah. And Petland leadership, if you're listening, John is ready for that call, saying you are ready to transition to a humane model.
Yeah, this doesn't have to be a hostile relationship forever. If they were to change their business model, we would tell the world, we would get to the tallest mountain and scream at the top of the tallest mountain, look, they did the right thing. Let's support them. I would personally, I don't live near a Petland. I think the closest Petland to me is in Pittsburgh. I'd drive up there and buy a few $100s worth of dog food and treats and supplies and toys if they would make that change. They're the only one of the top 30 pet store chains in North America that sells puppies. They don't have to do it to be very, very prosperous.
Thanks, John. We're here for you, Petland. Ball's in your court. PJ. All right. We know you've worked with, let's start. We're going to start on the positive note here. Tell us, we mentioned Neiman Marcus earlier. Talk to us about, because you work regularly with these, global companies. Talk about those that have said no to fur.
I would say, I said the long game, but you only have to go back to around 2015 where you started to see this wave of companies looking into their fur policies. And a lot of these fashion brands, I'll say, didn't even have any animal welfare policies before they started talking about fur. So we were able to, get our foot in the door. The Humane Society of the United States passed the Federal Truth in Fur Labeling Act, which just guaranteed that all fur products had to have the country of origin and the species on the label. There was previously a loophole that didn't allow all fur, and we started seeing, companies selling real fur as faux fur. So we started working with the FTC, working with these brands that eventually led to that federal law that closed that loophole. But by working with those companies, we got our foot in the door with some of the biggest brands around the world. We started talking about just the way animals are raised for fur. And then we also started to show them that this is something that their customers cared about. And it was around 2015 where like Armani, Hugo Boss went fur free. And a couple more trickled in that led to Gucci in 2017 announcing, it was
Gucci. Now, is that a new brand? I don't believe we've heard of that.
Gucci's been around for a long time. Is it a joke? Okay, good. I didn't know who were you talking to,
It's the straight face, Kelly.
I only buy luxury, PJ. Only luxury here. I know all about it. No,
but it was one of the hottest brands in the world at that time.
Yeah.
And so they took that opportunity to announce that they were going for free. And ever since then, I mean, it's most fashion companies at this point that have fur-free policies. And it's almost like a competition of who's the most humane fashion brand, because they started banning exotic skins now. Banning Angora, which comes from rabbits, and so it's these animal welfare policies are getting stronger and stronger. But it started with fur. So I mean, what's really great is there's only a handful of companies left that still sell fur, and which leads me to the worst offender at this point.
Bring it. Who do you have, PJ?
It's a company. It's the largest luxury company in the world. It's called Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. They also sell a lot of the fancy spirits that you see out there, but LVMH is for short. But they're the brand, they represent, or they're the parent company for Louis Vuitton, Dior, Loro Piana, and Fendi, which is essentially an Italian furrier. And they're owned by, I think he's the second richest man in the world right now, Bernardo Arnault. But yeah, it's just this really large luxury company that has yet to take that step in the right direction by going for free. And there's a couple reasons why I think they're on the naughty list. The first one is just simply their business model. So go back to Gucci. Gucci's owned by a company called Kering, which is like the second or third largest luxury company in the world. And Kering gave all of their brands, which is like Alexander McQueen, Saint Laurent, Gucci, it gave all of their brands autonomy to make the announcements, do the announcements that they want. And so those brands were able to trickle in by going for free, which eventually made it a really easy decision for Kering to say we're for free, because all their brands had already made that announcement. LVMH doesn't give their brands that autonomy. So we know, I mean, I've met with several of the companies that are owned by LVMH, and we know that they're for free. They just aren't able to announce it. And why that is a problem is because when these companies make these announcements, it's such positive feedback that all they want to do is do it like more. They love that feedback. They love hearing from their consumers. And I mean, when Gucci went for free, this is like one of my favorite things to tell companies is when Gucci went for free, it was one of their most liked posts on Instagram of all time. Same with Prada when they went for free. It was their most.
So it makes financial sense for these companies to do it in addition
and brand
to just
sense. Totally.
Yeah.
These companies are spending millions of dollars on social media with influencers and ads, and all they have to do is say, we're doing something good for animals, and they're going to get the most likes. It's an easy decision at that point. But LVMH doesn't even allow their brands to take that simple step, so they don't know how good it could be.
Are they just digging in their heels? I mean, at some point,
have they engaged
there's clear evidence other companies have done this, and it's
successfully.
They've done it. It's a win-win. Are they just being obtuse? Why aren't they just transitioning and doing that? I wonder.
I think there's a couple reasons. The first one is they've kind of sided with the European fur industry. They got in their corner. They defended them, even though there's no way to defend it. They somehow try to say European fur production is somehow superior to fur production in China and other countries, but it's exactly the same standards. So it makes no sense. They just are trying to say that one's luxury, the other one's not.
PJ, wasn't some of the European farms where we saw, viral outbreaks during the pandemic too?
Yeah, it's where it's a breeding ground for COVID-19. Avian flu is going through fur farms like wildfire. And
very
Finland
gross
right
places
now.
to be.
Yeah, so it's the other reason is also that they own Fendi, which like I said is essentially a furrier. The good news is Fendi at one time used to sell a lot of fur, but they've diversified their products quite a lot in the last few years, where you can go on their website right now and there's maybe 10 pieces of fur, where previously the whole website was just covered with fur. So they know where their consumers are. They're headed that direction, but they're doing it very, very slowly. And I think with fur production really leaving Europe at this point, we're seeing I think there's 20 countries that have banned fur production. There's a European Citizens Initiative that's happening right now that will essentially close all fur production in Europe. That those talking points that LVMH used to say that European fur is the only fur we buy and it's luxury and things like that is just not going to hold up anymore, because they're going to have to, if they're going to source fur anymore, they're going to be sourcing it from China, which is the largest producer of fur in the world. And so I think that might be the key that'll eventually allow them to go fur free. So we're really hoping that this Citizens Initiative will be successful.
And of LVMH, their kind of probably most popular known brand is Louis Vuitton, you said?
Yep. Louis Vuitton, and then Fendi and Dior are really their main ones, but they own other ones called Givenchy and Loro Piana, some of the lesser Loewe. So they own a lot of companies. And like I said, a lot of them are fur free. They just won't allow them to be fur free, which doesn't allow them to promote it. And they won't get all that positive feedback that I think that they would deserve if they took that step. And I'll also say it's just like this idea of luxury has changed in that this 10 years since, Gucci went fur free and Armani and Hugo Boss. And luxury now means who's the most innovative, who's the best on the environment, who's the most ethical, which always wasn't what luxury meant. And so, I mean, if LVMH truly wants to be luxury, they would be innovating the next generation of faux fur. They would be, we know that fur is one of the worst materials for the environment as well as animals. So they would be taking a step to move away from that. And
it sounds like they're so behind the times, because at years ago, wearing fur was iconic and seen as a status symbol. Now, I mean, everyone knows, whether you're in the animal welfare movement or not, that if you're a celebrity or a person, you're on a stage or you're known to be wearing animal fur versus faux fur, like, it is not a good look. I mean, it is a small fraction of people, I think, that think that is wise. But luckily, there's lots of other companies that people can shop for, for the holidays or anytime. You mentioned some of them. Armani, I think, did you say Burberry? Is Versace one of those?
Yep.
I'd love to see what they define as a, quote, luxury fur farm versus a non-luxury fur farm, because I bet they look awfully alike.
They look exactly the same.
And I have a theory that for fans of music, there used to be a lot of references and songs to some of these luxury brands. Louis Vuitton, I know Kanye West referenced it, but in more recent history, you've got Bruno Mars with Versace on the floor. So it also makes good sense, perhaps in the music world, to sing about these companies that are, doing well by animals.
I like that. Yeah. Only good companies we could sing about.
Yes.
So PJ, if they called you tomorrow, what would you do though?
Oh, just like JP, I would go buy all my suits from Louis Vuitton. No,
right?
Okay, PJ,
none of us can afford to shop these brands, but if our listeners can afford to shop these brands, consider not.
No. No, scream it from the mountaintops. We would celebrate LVMH, as the company that's taking a step in the right direction. We would, be able to the feedback that they would get, they would immediately get a bounce. I know when Nordstrom went fur free, their stock went up as a result. Like, this is real dollars that they can benefit from going for free, because this is just where consumers are at. And I can tell you, even we're meeting a lot with like investment and financial institutions now, which are creating fur-free policies. So they will no longer even fund companies that are associated with the fur trade. And because they see the writing on the wall that this industry is just going downhill so fast that they're not going to put their money in a company that is associated with it. And so
that's great. So it's financially risky for a company to invest in those companies. I mean, at every angle, the evidence seems pretty clear that that's, what companies should be doing.
Yeah. If you go to Goldman Sachs right now, it will say they're like companies they won't invest in are associated with assault weapons, like drug paraphernalia and the fur trade. So it's listed right there with those other things. And so I think, LVMH would open its door to more money if they were to take that step in the right direction and go fur free.
Well, y'all, thank you so much for being here today and sharing with us about these companies that are doing well and the companies that are not doing so well. I think Kelly touched on this a little bit earlier, but we're entering a high shopping season right now around the world, and if you are looking to buy your loved ones gifts, just consider who you're buying from, consider what they're doing, consider what they're doing for animals or not doing for animals. And make choices accordingly. There are lots of good places to get information about, the brands that are on the right path and the ones that are really dragging their heels. And so, thanks so much to our team for being here today and talking us through some of the places where headway is being made and where headway is still to come.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Get shopping.
All right, this has been Humane Voices, and we will see you on the next episode.